Everybody, thanks for watching. Today is January 28th, 2018, and it's my birthday. So definitely cool to be able to appreciate, a birthday and look back at everything and see how well you're doing and how much you learn and, enjoy and be thankful for the new people you have met and new people in your life and, the good things, all the good things that you have, achieved the prior year. And it's cool. It's cool. 36. Seems like I've been 35 for a long time. 36 now and moving. I feel great. I don't feel really no different. I see a lot of young people that follow me, people that's under like 25, 36. It feels the same. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm just older and a lot wiser and, a lot well off, a lot more in a better position in life than when I was 18, 20, but I feel good. Don't smoke. Don't really drink. I have a bar here, but it's really for guests and stuff like that when people come over and visit. I'm an occasional drinker, but it's good to get older and look at where you are at this age and be glad that you are in a position. I always tell people, I don't care who they is and how famous or how much money they got. I wouldn't want to be anybody but me. Just because what I went through in life and what I know and It's cool. But, today my birthday, and if I forget to say thank you to everybody who said happy birthday, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. But let's get into, this video. And the whole thing is I've been putting out, videos for a while, really on this subject and painting this picture about what happened, in Kemet after the Egyptian Empire fell. And if you've been paying attention to, ancient history and, the Metal Netter series and the whole thing with Mystery School, and you can see that this picture is being painted, telling the story, giving you the real history based upon, proven fact, based upon many historians. The issue becomes, when people look into the Bible, and if you have an understanding about history, just a brief understanding about things that was going on, and then you go look in the Bible, as I talked about, it's really easy for you to start to compare. They don't mention names and everything straight out, but you can compare some of the things that's happening to actual history, which is why people always say, well, the Bible is real history. It's a history book when it's not. Now, the good thing the Bible has going for it is it's old. And the problem is a lot of people, they don't really understand that the stories that seem like it's coming from real history were written after, the fact. So if you do something and then you write about it, you can't say what you wrote about is something that, didn't happen yet when you just did it. And that's basically what the Bible did. They wrote about what happened. That's where they got the stories from, stuff that happened already. And that you think that, Deuteronomy and all this stuff was written by Moses long before it ever happened, thus giving you a prophecy. And we know, as I've proven, it's not the case. So to look at the story, to understand exactly what's going on, because a lot of people, they still confused about this. And part of the reasons why a lot of people haven't seen all the videos and the DVDs I put out that really gives you the information is a lot of times I get questions and I'm like, didn't you see, such and such video? And, that'd be the issue. But, I can't expect everybody to see every single video. So I try to touch on these things. If it seems like sometimes I'm talking about the same topics over and over again, it's a lot of new people that's coming to the channel, and it's a lot of videos I have out there. I think I got like over 500 now. And it's a lot of people that's, coming to the channel and not really seeing everything. And a lot of people don't know about the DVDs and everything. So I try to keep this information out here and then just add more to it that I wasn't able to prior. So, with this, you got to, again, look at what happened, as I said, to just paint the picture. Egyptian Empire, trying to really understand the past and what was going on. Teaching other, civilizations like the Greeks and the Romans and everything about their culture, the mystery schools and everything like that. And eventually you would have the Greeks and, turn on the Egyptians, basically set them up with the Persians to where they basically let the Persians in the back door. Persians take over Egypt, and then, the Greeks take over the Persian Empire. And as I talked about in Ancient History Part 2, with the Diadochi Wars, the War of the Successors, we see what happened. We see that they fought amongst each other for hundreds of years until eventually the Greeks took over and the Persians regained power and basically came back in. But it's a lot of stuff in between that can give you, a lot of insight into what really happened and how, true history that's written about is completely different from the Bible. So again, a lot of this history begins with Alexander the Great and his story, his conquest. And, it's still a lot of information that we uncover from that time. You have a lot of people who believe he never existed, and a lot of people say it's really no real proof to support his existence. But then you have so many people that wrote about him, and there's so much history and stories and artifacts that goes to his existence being valid. So again, as we talked about in Ancient History Part 1, about the whole war for Tyre, and how, you can find it in the Bible. When you look in the book of Ezekiel 26, it's talking about the siege of Tyre, what happened there. But the story in Ezekiel is different from actual real history. The problem is real history has, it's real history, and it's so much proof that goes to that story versus the Bible story. But as I teach and tell you that the Bible story, of course, is a parable trying to teach you about something else. And that, in fact, when you really break down the actual parable in Ezekiel, it's actually giving you the real history when you understand it. So we talked about this in Ancient History Part 1, when it's talking about in the Bible, Ezekiel 26, 3 through 6, when it's talking about, God will basically cause many nations to come against Tyre, or Tyrus, any way you pronounce it, it's the same thing. And we know it wasn't really many nations, it was basically 3 that really came against Tyre, and which Tyre will be modern day Lebanon. And we understand, one, you had the Persian Empire when they came in. And the biggest thing that you got to understand, is the most important part about all this, is that it was once Egyptian territory. So you have from Egypt stretching over to Lebanon, which encompasses and includes Israel being Egyptian territory. That is huge. And if it's one of the reasons why we have confusion with the Hebrew Israelites, not understanding that this is Egyptian territory. It was full of black folks. So we know we have the Phoenician territory, which is that same area. And we know that, the name Phoenician comes from the Greek, from Phoenicus, which means purple people, because of this shellfish there that, emits this purple dye that's really strong and powerful that they use for kings and everything like that. Talked about all this. But we know that in the Bible, it's talking about God sending many nations to come against Tyrus or Tyre. And then we look, and first it says many nations. And then you look again in Ezekiel 26, 7, and it says that, God will send Nebuchadnezzar there. So it's like, what are you going to send? You're going to send a bunch of nations, or are you going to send Nebuchadnezzar? And remember, Nebuchadnezzar is supposed to be the one who goes there and destroy it. But we know, well, wait a minute. Alexander is the one that basically destroys the place. And when you listen to what it's talking about, when it said that it would never be built again, the only person this fits is Alexander, because after he destroyed it, it was never really built again. That city, they left it as like a monument. When the Romans came in, they actually built a monument to Alexander saying, he did this, and he built that land bridge. Remember, going to, the causeway or what have you, going to Tyre, because it used to be separated by water. We got in all this in Ancient History Part 1. But it's important because this is how you show that the actual history is different from the biblical story, and that it's a parable in it. Because, as I showed you guys, one, when it's saying Nebuchadnezzar, he's going to send him to basically lay siege, or send Nebuchadnezzar to Tyre. Then it's also saying he's going to send many nations. But then when you go to Daniel, and you look at Daniel chapter 2, when Daniel is basically interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and that is the secret to the whole thing. Remember, it's the whole man with brass iron or what have you, and it represents nations. So when the Bible is saying, I'm going to send Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel is giving you the hint, the metaphor for the representation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream going to Tyrus or Tyre and destroying it, because all those nations represented by those different materials represents the nations that basically came into Tyre and destroyed it, being, Greeks, Persians, Romans, or what have you. And there it is. That's how the parable works out. But in no way can you prove that Nebuchadnezzar ever came into Tyre and destroyed it. The only person that fits anything about destroying Tyre is Alexander, but you will not find that in the Bible. It's giving you something else. So again, as I said, they took actual history, parabolized it, switched it up, and gave it to you in the Bible because they really couldn't. That's what they did. Everything is pointing to history being distorted, put into the book, and given to you as some kind of biblical history that's a fact when it's not. So we know Alexander would die. We would have the War of the Diadochi, the War of the Successors, as I talked about in part 2 of Ancient History. And we see what happens. So when you start getting into that, and it's talking about the Ptolemies or the Ptolemies. I always say Ptolemy, but it's actually pronounced Ptolemy. But let's get into the Ptolemies and their history and what was going on and how the war happened for the people really wanting to succeed Alexander. And I talked about how Game of Thrones is based off of the Bible and based off these stories. And that, when they took out the Apocrypha from the King James Version, and I believe it's 1885, they took out First Maccabees, which talks about Alexander. It's talking about the Ptolemies. And that's important to really keep that in there for anybody that's trying to study the validity of the book. Because you'll be able to just go back in history and see, well, wait a minute, it's talking about the Ptolemies, but it's not the same story. So you have a lot of people who understand this and they read the Apocrypha and they're looking at Daniel and Ezekiel and they understand it's talking about the Ptolemaic dynasty and what was going on, but they're not really giving much names. The clue and hint they give you in the King James Version without the Apocrypha is Darius. So we know if it's talking about Darius, it has to be talking about the Persians and alluding to Alexander and the Ptolemies. So people look at this in the Bible and say, it's real history because it's talking about them. What they don't do is compare the stories, and that's the problem. Because when you compare the stories, you can see it's not the same. It's completely different. Everything is off, and it's not the same as historians told it. The thing you need to be asking yourself is, why is it in there? And that's what people do not do. Why would the Jews, why would the Jews write about the Greeks and their history and how they came into power and the Ptolemies? Why? If they was the ones who wrote the book. And if you watch my videos, as I told you, the Greeks are the ones who gave you your Torah and your Bible. They are the ones. Everything points to them. So it gets to the point where you have the Ptolemies take over. They would basically outlast the rest of the Diadochi and become the ones that was on top. It's a lot of Ptolemies. The dynasty is long and it's a whole bunch of them. So they would be the ones who basically last the longest and, form this unity with the Roman Empire, who would continue Hellenization, which, as I pointed out in the DVD, how Hellenization is really that time during the Diadochi War when they basically ruled all of this territory. It was all theirs. So this is important to understand when we're trying to put together this puzzle of the Bible, because then when you see this and then you look at the official explanation from where we get the Bible, we know we get it from Ptolemy II Philadelphus. And it was him trying to give us the Hebrew law in Greek. And he ordered the translation of the Hebrew law from Hebrew to Greek that was supposed to be done by 72 Hebrew elders, 6 from the 12 tribes, from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And as I said, the problem with that whole thing is there's no proof at all. There's absolutely no proof that this ever happened. And it's like all of a sudden, poof, we get the Septuagint. What Septuagint means 70. We get the Septuagint given to us by a fake pharaoh who conquered his way onto the throne. And this is how we get the Septuagint and how we really get the inception of the Bible. And this is by Greek people who say they got it from Jews who gave it to them in Hebrew. All this is important because we're trying to establish, validity to the Greeks creating the book. And then when you get Dr. Joseph Yehuda's book, as I talked about and pointed out, Hebrew is Greek, where he proves without a shadow of a doubt his work has not been challenged and proven wrong in any way. And he actually died before he could finish the book completely, and one of his students finished it, but he does it. He proves it 100% that the Greeks created Hebrew as well as Arabic, and it's in the book, which is why the book costs so much, as I pointed out. Everything I just gave you here, everything I just talked about and said, you cannot find this kind of fact and validity in the same capacity as trying to figure out if the Bible is true. So all the stories and everything I'm giving you, you can find that it's backed up by many scholars, many historians, facts and proof that could prove that these people actually exist, that gives more validity to the Greeks giving you the Septuagint in the Bible, the Old Testament, than Moses or anybody else. It's just that simple. So it's either you're going to follow the facts and what we can prove, or stick to the fact that, one, you only got faith, because we do not have any of the originals of the Septuagint or any kind of Hebrew manuscript that predates the Septuagint. So the Hebrew Israelites, the Christians, or anybody else, they can say what they want. None of them can prove that there was a Hebrew manuscript that predates the Septuagint that we had in our possession at any time. There's no proof of that. A lot of people who don't know are quick to point out the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. We never had it. Prove it. We never had it. We never had one. And we know for hundreds of years, for over 300 years, so-called Jews accepted the Greek Septuagint for hundreds of years until Christianity came into play. And this is when they start questioning, the Greek version of the Hebrew law, which is weird when it's supposed to be a Hebrew law. And, the Hebrew language is thought to be lost. So this is how they were spreading it. This is your history. This is what you're supposed to know. And the language is lost. We got it in Greek to teach you, because they all spoke Greek, because this is around the time Hellenization was going on. And we know that Diadochi ruled that whole area. So this is real history. This is the history that you find that we can prove. So it all fits with everything. And the thing is, when you understand, as I said before, that Israel was ruled by the Egyptians, so what did the people look like? They were black. They were African people that was in Israel. These are your first Jews. These are the people that they forced Judaism on, because they couldn't get them to worship the Greek gods. The Africans in Israel would not accept this stuff. They wouldn't take it because they knew what it was. They knew where they stole it from. It's from their people. So you would have eventually Judaism created, which, as I pointed out, it mimics deeply, when you pay attention, Greek mythology. So as I pointed out again, Adam and Eve, you have Eve and the apple, or Eve and the fruit, releasing the ills onto mankind. Same thing with Pandora's box, Noah's Ark, Deucalion and Thera. You have Samson, Hercules, or what have you, Zeus, Jesus, God. All that stuff fits with Greek mythology. And again, Greek mythology predates any biblical anything. So talked about, trace it back to 1000 BCE with Homer's Odyssey and the Iliad. So again, these are all points going towards the Greeks giving us this stuff, this doctrine. No Hebrew or Christian can give you anything to the contrary with so much proof to back it up. And this is what you really got to understand, because it seems as if people are really not getting this history, and they're skeptical about it when, it's laid out. This is why I put the stuff out and put the information out, to really give you guys this painting, this picture. It's easy to piece together when you really do the research. There is no validity to what these people are saying. So when you understand, one, that these people was black, and this Judaism was forced onto them. When you read even in First Maccabees, when it's talking about, Ptolemy basically persecuting the Jews. And this is documented time where it was wars with the Jews, that these black people, what they call Jews, fighting, for their land, fighting for Israel, fighting for Italy even, because they was there. And it all leads up to this, when they talk about, Josephus is talking about the Jewish war against Rome. And as I pointed out, these were the indigenous people of Rome who were black, African people, who was trying to take back the land that was taken from them, and wars ensued. And they're just stapling these people as Jews when they wasn't all Jews. And, when you understand that once they indoctrinated these people, and it became a generational thing, to where the generations that knew the truth died off, and they raised their children with the understanding that they were Jews and Hebrews, and gave them this language and this fake history, they carried it on and they spread it. And when they let them out, they went and spread that doctrine, into Africa, which is why you have Hebrews so proud to look back, to the 1st century CE and the 2nd century and say, look, we got proof of black Hebrews. So what? They do not predate the 4th century BCE when this inception happened. So when you do the math and you go and look at the 4th century being when the Greeks went in there and took over Egypt, and the fact that we can't find any proof of any Hebrew or Jew before that, you see exactly what happened. Factor in the Ptolemies. Ptolemy II of Philadelphia has given us the Septuagint and the whole story from LXX that has been proven a lie there it is. It's right there. The history is laid out. It shouldn't really be too many people confused about it unless you want to be. So if we keep this thing going, we keep it going, and as I talked about in part 2 of ancient history, we see what happened, that while the Diadochi was fighting against each other, the successors of Alexander were fighting wars. The whole Seleucid Empire and everything that happened with the Ptolemies and everything, was the Seleucids and the Ptolemies would be the last ones. And eventually Rome would take the Seleucid and join with the Ptolemies, and you have the Greco-Roman era, and basically just it becoming Rome. But you had Rome rise and breed big cock diesels, who they call barbarians, who they try to blame on the fall of Rome, which that's true, but it wasn't the fall of Rome, as I said, for the white people. It was the fall of Rome for the Africans that was there, because the barbarians got in there and took over, because they knew unless they breed these big cock diesel super soldiers to fight against the African people, they couldn't beat them. So they bred an army to basically go in and take that over. So, Rome established their whole Catholicism and the papacy and everything like that. And you had, around the same time, the Persian Empire sprang up and began to challenge Rome, and had this whole wars that I talked about from, it was about 96 BC to all the way up to like the 7th century CE. And it's a long war. And as I said, it ended status quo antebellum, and you had the creation of Islam and the incorporation of the Muslims with the Moors, the little Moors that was left after they had the Knights Templars going out and wiping the Moors out. Another thing that I touched on, but a lot of people don't realize, they were hunting down Moors, and that was their job, to hunt down the Moors and kill them. And you only had few left, and they ran and they scattered. The ones that was left signed a deal with Rome to join up with the Muslims, which is why you had Muslims in the Knights Templar. I pointed that out, talked about that as well. And that's what's going on. That's what it is. They sold out because they had to. They was getting wiped out, and they was tired of the damn Knights Templar hunting their asses down. So the Assassin's Creed, as I pointed out, and that whole thing about the Moors was about that. That's what's really, that's really what it's about when you understand history. And you had this go on, and just giving you the history, understanding Rome growing in power and everything like that, and then understanding the inception of the King James Version, which this video is about, giving you this history. So when you understand again how you end up with the King James Version, which the Hebrews want King James to be black, because they know when they trace that Bible back, there is no way it did not come from the Greeks, white men. So they need King James to be black, and they need King James to have a spirit put on him to give us a true version of the Bible. Because any way you slice it, King James used the Masoretic text, Textus Prescriptus. He used the Latin Vulgate. All those books, whatever you want to name, could not exist without the Septuagint Greek, period. So if you say he had a spirit put on him, he just came up with this new book from the Lord, it makes it as if he didn't use the Greek books, that he just came up with a holy book on his own because he got, got hands laid on him and he got the Holy Spirit. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. What really happened, when you understand history, is that we know King Henry VIII, he was pissed at the Pope for not giving him the divorce. And he basically, kicked Rome, the papacy, out of the British Empire and gave us, the Great Bible. And he took out all of the verses and books that was considered Romanist, from Rome. And this is basically how you start the English, dynasty of Bibles, which after that we had Elizabeth, Bloody Mary, give us the Bishop's Bible. And then we got the Geneva Bible. And then we got King James, because the Geneva Bible called the Pope the Antichrist. And you had, of course, Bloody Mary, Queen Elizabeth, trying to get back in Rome's good graces, giving us the Bishop Bible and basically downplaying everything else. So King James was basically tasked with the job of bringing this stuff together, which we know he was a Mason, documented. And the man he got to help him with the whole project, Francis Bacon, is considered one of the fathers of Freemasonry. And the book is filled with it. And when you understand, you can see it. So what they did, as I said, because you had Freemasonry being understood and known, and a lot of people who who got into it around that time understood what they was getting into. So as I said, if you have a secret society, you can't have a book. If you have a book, you risk that book getting out and people knowing your secrets. So again, the best place to hide something is in plain sight. And the fact that Francis Bacon has anything to do with the Bible, and you understand who this man is and how he's the master of coding, then you understand why the Bible should not be looked at as valid history, and that it is coded and parabolized. And what's hidden in it is the agenda of the elite, which is why it seems as if Bible prophecy is coming true when it's not. When, as I said, you can't point to me and show me any biblical history that's proven that was not created or fulfilled by man, as I talked about. And I'm going through this, and I talked about it before. Israel becoming a nation, that was men. Isaiah 17:1, Damascus falling, coming to heap of ruins, that was Obama. Anything else, it's a celestial event or blood moons or what have you, natural disasters, stuff that has been happening for a long time that you can calculate and predict, as we know the ancient civilizations did so. So they ain't doing nothing, magical. All this stuff is man, because it's their book that they created. So, which is why, as I always point out, you have, and I talked about, having a Masonic Bible, which should tell you something right there. And as I talked about, I had a friend give me this. So there it is. There's your Masonic King James Version right here, showing you the reason why they had this book and the reason why they use it is because they hit their agenda within this book. And if you are a member, brother of the craft or what have you, whatever they call themselves, you understand what's going on. And you understand who God is, which is what I was talking about God. You understand what Jesus is, talk about that. And you can praise God and praise Jesus when you really know what they are. And that's the difference. That's the thing. So, the history is what you got to look at. And then when you actually really do look at it and see everything else, you ask yourself this, if it's real, what's the whole point of having all these different Bibles? How can you have a book that's so important? It's supposed to be the Word of God, and we don't have the originals, and we got so many different versions and so much different crap, in these books. It can't be, especially when you have Revelations. It's saying don't add or take away from the book. We also understand the control that Rome had on the Bible for hundreds of years, forbidding people to change the language because, there was already, mesmerizing and tricking and captivating their people with the Latin biblical Bibles, the Latin books first, had to get their own people. And then, of course, the English language was created for us to fall victim to the Bible, just like Arabic was created for the Muslims and Hebrew for the Jews. Every time they needed us to really go by their plan and follow their agenda, they changed the language and forced the new language on people so they can indoctrinate them and incorporate their beliefs and everything that they're doing in that system with the Bible. So this is why we have English. And it's right there. Everything is right there. Deuteronomy 28, I pointed that whole thing out. The reason why it seems as if it's talking about black people in America, black slaves, because it is. But again, it was written between 1604 and 1611 when slavery was all the way already in full swing. So it's not as if, Deuteronomy 28 is saying the exact same thing as, Moses wrote, because Moses ain't write shit, don't exist. It's giving you King James Version that he's seen with his own eyes. And the reason why it looks like a prophecy is because it was written the same time the stuff was going on. It's not a prophecy. It's not old. And again, when you go back to the older manuscripts, it's different. As I pointed out, Deuteronomy 28:68, when you look at it in the oldest manuscripts, it's not talking about going back to Egypt on ships. It's talking about children in the Codex Sinaiticus and in the oldest biblical manuscripts. It's not talking about no slavery or none of that stuff. That was put in there in the King James Version to justify and give validity to slavery. So what these Hebrews are not realizing, what they're following, is the same doctrine that was once preached to the slaves. And they're trying to regurgitate it back to you, not knowing what they're doing. How are you going to justify to the slaves and keep them in check that they are supposed to be slaves? And that's how they did it. They forced them to go to church. They read to them the Bible, Deuteronomy 28, and used that to justify them being in slavery, and they bought it and believed it. And this is what these Hebrews are doing. These Hebrews are really getting you to follow the same exact doctrine used on our ancestors. And you've fallen for it because it's exactly what they used. I mean, what do you think when they read Deuteronomy, even after slavery, when they could read and they was reading the Bible and they read Deuteronomy 28:68? Think about how you feel now about it. And think about how they must have felt when they seen it and read it. Like, damn, it's talking about us. So, you 10 years removed from slavery, learn how to read and everything like that. And you read in Deuteronomy 28:68 and it's talking about, the yoke of iron. And in Deuteronomy 28, it's talking about the yoke of iron and slavery and what's going to happen. And you remember the slave master told you the exact same thing. And it's blowing their mind. And they stuck to it. They got it in their heart that this was what happened. And that God somehow gave them favor and released them from bondage, because they was good. They did right. They served their time and, they fixed the whole problem with the covenant they broke. And the Lord is showing them favor by releasing them from slavery. And you had a whole generation of slaves, ex-slaves, come up believing this until, it passed out because we was dealing with so much. The stories passed away and people just really they didn't really teach that stuff. They didn't really teach it to their kids that, you're cursed. We were cursed and God freed us and we served our time. And a lot of people don't think about that. A lot of people don't understand that obviously they knew about Deuteronomy 28:68. 1900s, the early 1900s. Of course, when they could read, they read the book, they was going to church. And of course, they must have understood that this had to be true. So this Hebrew doctrine that they're kicking, it's not new. It's the same thing the white man was giving us in slavery, reading to us. When you read or listen to slave narratives in the Library of Congress, I talked about this before, the slaves is telling you the exact same thing. When you read the, thousands of transcripts and some of the audio left behind, one of the parts that you can find, because there's not many of them in there, of course they would take them out when they're actually talking about church. And listen to what they're talking about. I put it in the calculated, not the calculated structure. I put it in the beginning. When it's coming on, that's getting the Bible, Christianity finally explained. Listen to what they're saying, in the beginning. And it's deep. It's deep when you read it, you look at it, and you see exactly what they was doing. So, work and slave for your master. And, when you die, you're going to go to heaven and be blessed. Same thing people believe in now. We just got to keep believing in the Lord and we're going to get our mansions when we die. What kind of shit is that? We're going to get our mansions when we die. Obey your earthly master as if you would God, as if you would Jesus. And how could you look at that in the Bible and think, that's something you should follow? Obey your earthly masters as if you would your heavenly Father or Jesus or what have you. And we're supposed to look at this and obey these white men who have done so much horrible stuff on this planet. We the only ones that just so happen to be, going through this, cursed or what have you. So as I talked about and pointed out in, the many hidden accomplishments of African people, about the African kingdoms and everything that we had on this planet in Africa, long before any European monarchy or kings ruled, we already had kingdoms and everything, because while the Daldoki War was going on and these Greeks were slaughtering each other, the Africans that escaped from Kemet and, northern Africa went down into Africa and they got their shit together. They set up kingdoms and castles and all kinds of stuff, was making money and doing very well. And then finally, the Europeans looked up and said, hey, these Africans is killing. We got to get our shit together and go take them down. And that's exactly what they did. And it all fits. Everything is right there. So once they realized that we got our shit together while they was fighting and killing each other, we got our shit together and built castles and kingdoms that the ruins still exist to this day. As I pointed out, for anybody that's new seeing this, still exists to this day. And these kingdoms exist and these empires existed long before any Europeans. And what happened was, with trade and, Africans having to really work with so many people around the world because we traded everywhere. Eventually, once they got their whole conglomerate of religion together for business reasons, a lot of empires was forced to convert. They got the Mali and the Songhai with Islam, and then they got the other empires with Christianity and was forcing them to convert, as I said, for the Muslims. Where were the Muslims? Where were the Arabs when the Songhai Empire and the Mali Empire was going down by the Europeans? When the Songhai Empire was being at war, being attacked by the Europeans. Where were the Arabs to come in to help their Muslim brothers and sisters? Because if they would have came in, it would have been a slaughter. There's no way the Europeans would have won. This is how you know they've been under them for the longest. They've been on their side. And that was part of the plan to destroy those kingdoms and enslave those people, which they did. Mali and Songhai. Same thing with Swahili, Kerma Kingdom, Congo Kingdom. We know about Leopold, Belgians and everything like that. Keep going back far, even 1800s, going back to the 13th century CE and all that. We see what happened. All those kingdoms was taken down. We was enslaved. Those kingdoms was destroyed so that the only people that would be left would be primitive Africans and the few that did survive. But the main people were enslaved, and the kingdoms, the kings and those people in those kingdoms who had knowledge was brought to America in chains. The rest of us was already in America, or you could be from one of those African kingdoms and be royalty. You will never know. But that's what happened to us. That's the history. And it really, I just gave it to you from Kemet all the way to present day. And you understand, what happened after that. And once we got released from slavery and everything that ensued. So, it's a lot of questions on the history of the Bible and the validity of the Bible itself. But when you look at true history as given to you by many people, a lot of people are going to say to you, well, how is it any different that people believe in the Bible? It's a book versus people who believe in the other books that's saying something different. How is it different? The difference is we have facts, we have proof, we have actual artifacts, we got people who exist, and it's the same as you would do any other kind of case. You would follow the facts, you would find any type of evidence. We have all that. As far as the validity of the Greeks creating the book, you have nothing for the Bible. Zero. Goose egg. Nothing. There was no chariot, as I pointed out, found in the fucking Red Sea. That's a lie. Was no chariot found. It's bullshit. Noah's Ark was never found. They admitted that was a hoax. Bullshit. There is nothing. Nothing. That's the difference. And when one people write something and say something, and another group of people who never met these people ever before say the same thing, that tells you something right there. There has never been another civilization that wrote the Bible that did not copy it from, the source, the Septuagint. So when we get the Peshitta, when we get the Vetus Latina, Septuagint, plain and simple. So nobody else wrote about this stuff, only them. So we can't go out and find anybody else outside of this area talking about Jesus or Moses, anybody else built any kind of monuments like they did with the Egyptians and everybody else. We can't find any bodies. We can't find no ruins or civilizations of these people before the 4th century BCE. That should tell you something. So we wanted to go through this history quickly as possible to get you up to speed. Definitely check out the DVD, Ancient History, Volume 1 and 2. The Metal Nettle series, Mystery School and all that to really get caught up. And videos I also have as well. If you can't afford it, the DVDs, videos I have as well on YouTube. Definitely look at them. The videos I have on the Hebrews and the Bible. You can get this history. It's there. And please do the research. Look for yourself so you can see what I'm giving you is fact. Because you're not going to get that from a Hebrew or anybody else because they don't have any facts. So yeah, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch. Support. Thanks to everybody who supported and bought the DVDs and what have you. Appreciate the support. And really wanted to touch on this real quick and do a quick history to get you guys really up to speed as to what has been going on. And it's a lot more to all the stories, to everything I talked about. A lot more. I have videos on YouTube, as I said. But definitely check them out. Thank you guys for watching. See you next video.